Welcome to the Outer Realm with MicheleDerocher and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are broadcasting live right now on just our YouTube channel. So only the subscribers, only of you guys are going to get to see this before the recording goes live this evening. So we are on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM from beautiful New Orleans. Of course, as always, we are fully sponsored by these guys, Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey for probably the last 5 years. So we're so grateful for them. Thank you, Folgers. In fact, we couldn't thank you enough. Also, big thank you to Justin Snicker, aka Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, who is the voice that you hear on the intro. He's responsible for the music as well. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, electronic music. I'll be okay. It's early. Anyway, you can find his music anywhere that you stream your favorite music tunes. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Thank you so very much. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre and does amazing commission pieces. So again, this is technically a pre-record, but all of you subscribers get to partake this afternoon. Tonight it will air across all of the 8 platforms: Roku TV, Rumble, X, Facebook, all the YouTube channels. It will be everywhere. So this gives you an opportunity to communicate with our guest who doesn't get to be here in the evenings. And I know a lot of times you guys end up having questions and we're just like, okay, sorry. So this is your opportunity, and I've posted it everywhere, and I've talked about it last night. And I see, oh, hi, Catherine. Glad you can make it here today. Wow, this is all awesome. Awesome. Hello, Contessa. Hello, Heidi. Hello. Okay, so far so good. You guys are all chiming in. This is going to be a lot of fun. Today, Mark will be talking about his TV series that he did, which was UK based, and it's basically called Lost Treasures. So we're going to be exploring season 1 of Lost Treasures because there's a lot to talk about, and there'll be a few little treats along the way. So with that being said, without further ado, hello.
Hello. Hey.
I always love hanging out with you in the afternoon.
Oh, live without a net. If you're watching us on YouTube, it's live without a net.
Yeah, I love it. This is great, though. My God, we always have so many fun things to talk about, and it's hard to pick because people don't realize, Mark is a fan favorite and frequent flyer here at the Outer Realm. Has been on several times, and we've got him booked for the year, probably going into next year. Great, I know, because there's so much to talk about, and it's hard to pick and choose what we want to do first. So today, exploring lost treasures.
I suppose an introduction is in order.
2025
is exactly the 20th year anniversary of season 1 of Lost Treasures.
Wow!
So there you go. It was commissioned in 2004.
Yes.
And the first series was produced and broadcast in 2005. So this is the very first of anything connected to the anniversary of Lost Treasures. So you have an exclusive.
Wow.
And also, there you go. And in your intro, what you did mention was it is a UK-based TV series. It was made by ITV1 Granada, which is the northern hub, if you like, of ITV in this country. We've got sort of several big channels, but it's always been BBC, ITV, Channel 4. And back in the time that this was made, ITV and BBC kind of went head to head. You know, they were the big two. And we ended up on ITV. And I've got to tell you this because this will put a smile on your face. ITV, right at the very beginning, they went, we don't do archaeology. They said, we leave that to the BBC. So I said, well, okay, you've just commissioned an archaeology series. So what we're going to do with this? They said, what we're going to do is put you under news and current affairs. So technically, it's a news and current affairs program, reporting on new discoveries, new archaeology, histories, mysteries, discoveries. You know, we even did ghosts. We did all sorts of stuff. Covered a very, very wide range of topics. But it was quite unique. You know, it was like ITV's Stab at Time Team, which of course is Channel 4. So
I love Time Team. I had to watch it all. I couldn't stop.
Well, when we were writing the scripts for Lost Treasures, we actually all sat around a table, and the first thing we said is, we are not going to be as slow and boring as Time Team was.
And lots of running. Lots of running.
That's it. Series of small walls and a couple of bits of pottery. You know, forget all that.
Yes.
And also they're site driven. They're kind of tied to wherever it is they are.
Yes.
And we tended to run all over the place. You know, we went wherever the subject took us. You know, which was fantastic. I mean, the amount of stuff we covered is ridiculous. You know.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. I really enjoyed it. And I want people to know, because you can't find this on YouTube. And
yes, it's out there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And what was the YouTube?
Right. What we did 2 years ago, I decided that all the material, every single one of the 22 episodes, plus 6 extras, plus 3 documentaries that spun off for Sky, all of it had to be put out. Because, I mean, to be honest with you, 2005, the format is not HD, it's not digital. It was shot in the old format, old school, old audio, which incidentally, I've got to say, let's say this right at the very beginning, that's one of the reasons it's never come out in its entirety as a complete DVD release. Because the first season is small format television, ordinary definition, ordinary audio. The second season is the widescreen, but it's still ordinary definition, ordinary audio. Season 3 then goes all singing, all dancing. It suddenly becomes HD everything.
Wow.
In widescreen. But when you start to shuffle those episodes around and put them next to each other, you can really see the failings in the earlier one, because it's 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. The seasons, the series are 05, 07, 08. And right at the very beginning, the reason why I think your viewers might be interested is the first 6 episodes, which we did in 05, when they were broadcast, ITV said, wow, I've never seen anything like this. This is absolutely amazing. And they went and sold it onto Sky. So it went onto Sky History. So season 1
which
and
is like our History Channel in the US.
Yeah, it was broadcast worldwide. It went out to Australia, it went out to America, it went out to Africa, it was all over the place. So we were getting all kinds of emails coming from everywhere, you know. We put the north of England on the map.
Yay, that's all right.
Hey.
That's all right. Yeah. So I guess we're starting with episode 1, which I found fascinating for many reasons, which was the Winwick Giants.
Yeah, Winwick it's called, the Winwick Giants.
Winwick.
Yeah, that episode is called Giants and Battles. And I suppose it's a good place to jump in.
Yeah, let's start with number 1.
When it was commissioned, 2 of us went into ITV. Okay, so I'll start right at the very beginning. It does, trust me, I'm going there. So
okay,
stay with me on this. Okay. And we went into this. I can't remember the names of the executive producers. So ITV, if you're watching this, please forgive me. But we went to this first guy who was the first executive producer at ITV, and it was my producer and me. And I'd basically written the series. So if anyone goes off to Amazon and gets Celtic Warrington and Other Mysteries, that was the foundation for the series, those 3 books.
Mm-hmm.
ITV said, yes, we really like this idea. The producer friend of mine was at Chester. I was lecturing at Chester. He was in media there. So between us, we kind of put together this idea. He'd got an idea for a series. I'd got an idea for something very similar. It's quite funny, actually, because we both said to each other, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could call it Lost Treasures? But I bet somebody else has already done that. Wrong. Nobody else had ever done it. So we got the title, Lost Treasures is ours. Nobody else has ever done it straight like that. So, hey.
Beautiful.
So this commissioning editor sat there and he's chatting away to me producer. So all that side of it went very well, the money, the contracts, all that sort of stuff. And then he just sat there and he said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll commission this series on one condition. So me and this producer are like, okay. And he just looks at me and he points at me and he goes, you're presenting it. And I'm like a rabbit in headlights. Yes, I've done television before, and I've been behind the camera before, and I'm great at researching. But he said, you're just natural. You know, you can sell this, you can do it. So that was my sort of baptism of fire. Anyway, what I'm coming to is if you watch the first episode, there's a bit where the camera swings off the church, and I'm stood there, and I launch into that first piece where I introduce where we are. That's not where the episode begins, but that was the first thing that we actually filmed. Now, at this point, nobody had seen what I was going to wear.
I love it, though.
So you can
crossed out.
Well, yeah, you know where this is going. So when we did the pilot, I was just wearing a long coat and a hat. But I went away because I did my stint at art college, so I knew a bit about costume design, and I came up with that black time traveling historian.
I was like the whole dark man.
That's it, yeah. So he appears and he disappears, and you've got all the archetypes there. You got Odin and goodness knows what else. But the real reason I did it is when you watch it on a TV screen, if somebody's dressed in black, your eye is drawn to the person wearing black.
That's right.
So from a practical point of view,
always.
well, I just remember they've got all the crew there, director, you know, sound and continuity and all that thing. And I just walked onto that shot and nobody moved. You know, that uncomfortable silence for a couple of minutes when they're all like, and then the producer broke the silence and he went, I suppose it'll work. Yeah, I think this will work.
I think it
worked not that they had any choice, like, you know, but so that's why in that first episode, right from day one, I'm the man in black, you know, with the big new rock boots and all that. And if people watch all the episodes, you might notice there are 3 different costumes because there was a costume commission for each of the 3 different series. The first one, that's known as the Witchfinder General. So it's loosely based on a, you know, Van Helsing 1600s type. Ghostbuster Witchfinder General thing. That's what it looks like. Season 2, though, that's Time Traveller. So it's got grey leather on it. It's got different things. It's a slightly different hat. It's got glasses that are different. So that's the Time Traveller. Season 3, there's this socking great big coat covered in red embroidery. Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. It's 2 layers thick.
They upgraded,
Well, that's based on manga. That's a manga design for that one. So we changed each time. We never got to season 4. There was a green one designed for season 4 that was lovely, but it never got made. But actually, they said it doesn't matter how much you spend on the costumes as long as we can see the result on the camera.
Right.
So it was like, you know, 1,500 quid a costume. You know, there's a lot of money went into that. So even the crosses, the belt buckles, the fittings, we had some fittings made, the different glasses. If you watch it very carefully, I think there's only one episode where I used 2 different costumes because we go over to Ireland and I end up with a different one. But another little interesting little fact right from episode 1. If you look carefully, I've got a watch on. I'm wearing a watch with a red face on it. The truth is, I put that on as part of the costume. It was a digital 1960s watch, very early 1970s digital watch. And it failed on the first day. It just went out on the first day and never came back. So what we said was, every time traveller has a means of jumping from one time period to another. And it's the watch. The watch is the key. It's there right through the entire series. And very often you'll see me touch that and I go, and I disappear. I'll vanish and I'll reappear somewhere else.
That's awesome, though.
And it's right through the whole series.
That's by the
last season, we're doing it. I'm hopping in and out of things like you wouldn't believe,
Right. Right.
But that resulted. It was the Daily Express over here had a big Sunday headline for one of the series.
I love it.
And it said ITV's answer to Doctor Who. ITV's Time Lord,
Right.
So I'm the only non-BBC Time Lord ever to appear on television.
I think it's great that you were able to have a lot of fun with it, aside from the obvious of going to
there's so much
incredible locations. Like anywhere I travel in the world, I have to find a castle and a church or cathedral somewhere. I have to spend time. Cemetery is just bonus round, but because I love it. Yeah, Scotland. I spent a lot of time in Romania. I went, to the cool cemeteries and such. But I really love ancient architecture and cemeteries. People don't realize back in the day you had incredible mausoleums and beautiful monuments, and a lot of times they were mixed in, especially in the UK, which I know you're going to touch on tonight. But like you find some like random obelisk coming out of the ground. That's like, how the hell old is this thing? It's like 1,000 years old. So it's like, right. So I love that. So
that first episode really defines everything. I mean, a lot of people say it's one of the best episodes, and they have that as a favorite. So it's season 1, episode 1.
Yes, it was good.
Did I say it was called Winnick Giants and Great Battles? I think it goes on as Giants and Battles.
Right.
And that's basically what it's about, because, as you say, the giant side of it, this is where it gets interesting, because we take the church apart piece by piece.
Oh, the church is incredible, and the tomb,
so much stuff in it. Yeah, you've got knights' tombs, you've got bits. It goes all the way back to Battle of Makerfield in 642 AD. So you've got the Saxons fighting the Welsh. So it's very early, and there's lots of evidence for that inside the church. But then it goes back even further, because in the Victorian times, they built the Edward Pugin. There's a Pugin end of it where the architect builds this kind of bigger end with the altar in, and it's got all these fabulous Pugin tiles and the ceiling and all that. When they were building it, they actually went through, because they tried to build deeper foundations, they went through the stone that the church sits on and discovered that underneath it there were these prehistoric burials, which I think there were 3 of. If I remember the account right, there's 3. And they go in as being over 7 foot tall. So that's where the Winnick Giants come from.
Yeah.
But it's funny because nobody knows where they are. So what I did was I said to the camera crew, I said, well, as an archaeologist, I'm not supposed to do this, but I do actually do dowsing.
Get all metaphysical. But that's a great way to find bodies, dowsing.
Of course it is. And I bought specifically for this Man in Black character this wonderful dowsing bob that formed a metal spiral. And I've got to tell you, with dowsing bobs,
which is a pendulum for anybody who doesn't understand the Brit.
piece of string with something hanging on the end of it. Most of them it's just a chain and a bob.
Yes.
And it swings, and it's like, it's not good enough for me, that, because you can do it yourself. You can make it. But what I did was I got hold of this one it's got a join on it, so the bob joins to the chain through a separate link. And what you're looking for, the chain has to stay still. The chain doesn't move. It's the bob rocking back and to, because you can't fake that. It's impossible to fake.
Yes.
So basically, I've got
brilliant.
I've got the whole camera crew there. They're all set up, and they're like, okay, go for it. Yeah, we'll do this. We'll film it. So I set off across this floor with this dowsing bob, and I'm just mumbling away. I'm chatting away to myself, forgetting completely that I've got a microphone attached to me. So I don't know how long the footage was. It must have been a good 5 minutes of footage of me wandering around.
Right.
And as I'm hitting certain positions, you can see on camera, this bob's rocking back and to.
It was, yeah.
So I got to the end of it after 5 minutes, and I kind of, I'm concentrating on what I'm doing, and I looked up like that, and the whole crew just gave me a round of applause. They were like, hey, that was fantastic. I said,
you found them.
I was like, do you not want me to do that again? And they're like, no. They went, that was perfect. So we got it in one take. So when you watch the episode, there's a close-up of the bob, and you can see it rocking back and to. Well, what we didn't realise in 2005, that because that got through what's called compliance, because the TV people allowed that to be broadcast, we actually made television history. That is the first and only time really to date that anybody on mainstream television has done dowsing. That was it. That was the first. And not only that, but it worked. They'd actually caught it on camera. So the amount of feedback we got off that episode was just enormous. You know, people were saying, wow, this is incredible. And I'm like, well, 80% of archaeologists douse, they just don't admit it, you know. So that was the opening sequence.
And a lot of people use the rods as well. Like, you know, it's almost like by using the rods, because there is somebody in Canada who does it. A lot of the jails, the old jails and old school properties would get him to come in to locate prisoners that have been buried. And he would come in and these things would just start crossing and they would dig and there would be said interment, right? So did they validate? Like, did they know what pretty much where these skeletons were?
I'm convinced that what you see on camera is where those skeletons are.
Okay.
And then later on in the episode, so I think it's in either, because the episode's in two halves, I think in the second half we interview the local historian chap. Well, off camera, he actually went to the spot where those skeletons were buried and he confirmed it. He absolutely confirmed it. He said, yeah, that's absolutely right. That's where these fellas were found, you know.
And they're still there.
Well, I'm going to assume that they are. Yeah, I'm going to assume they're still there.
Well, because sometimes they'll remove them if they'll put them in a museum if they're really old like that.
No,
right?
These are in the foundations of the building.
Crazy!
So inside the building, so they couldn't really take anything out. They've left them in the middle. So, but the accounts there. I mean, it's in the antiquarian writings for Winwick. You know, they've got the account of the giants. Right. So right from the get-go, you know, we were finding stuff in weird places, you know, ancient history. We just launched in, and then the rest of the series is more of the same, you know, but in some cases on a bigger scale.
I found it interesting here because you believed that the church was built over, like, obviously it was built over some old burial mound, but a power spot, ley lines, which, I mean, was that commonplace? I feel, you know, but I'm not an expert, so I'm going to ask the expert of archaeology. It was a common for you know, churches or religious establishments, we'll say, because there were so many different ones back then. They weren't all Christian based. Some were pagan, some were built over Druid temples and things of that nature. Was this commonplace?
Pope Gregory, I think it's Pope Gregory the Great in 640 or something AD. He writes to the church in general. He just says, look, if people are going to a place and it's their religious place and it's been that for a long time, then there's no harm in just plonking your church there. You know, that's where you should put it, because people are going there anyway. Just adopt the site. That's not a problem.
Okay. Which would make sense. Yeah.
But again, it's a case of cutting edge research in terms of the program. I wrote the book that was based on back in the 1990s. And I said, this looks remarkably similar to Avebury. The layout is very, very similar to Avebury. So what I said is, right, you've got Stonehenge and Avebury. You come all the way up, then you've got Winwick. And then if you go further up to Scotland, you've got this other site, this amazing site called Cairnpapel Hill, which is near Edinburgh. And those three sites are basically the same. They point the same direction. They've got the same bank, the circles and all that. The latest hot news, which has only come out in the last few months, is that the altar stone at Stonehenge comes from just above that site in Scotland. So, of course, there's a link. You know,
I think I have a stone from there.
Well, they
say that it came from the quarry, the same stone. Well, they said the same stone as Stonehenge, so if it all came from there.
Yeah, it's blue stone.
The blue stone, yeah.
But the actual altar stone, I mean, most of the Stonehenge comes from Preseli Mountains, which is Wales.
That's the Preseli stone, that's right.
Yeah, well, no, this the two altar stones that used to be there, there's one still there. They dragged that all the way from Scotland. So what we say in that program, without realizing it, has been proven 20 years later that to be true. There are these connections all the way down with the same culture building the same sites in the same way.
Incredible.
So Up to
It's
now, I mean,
incredible.
I said this about the original books. I said, look, if they're wrong, then we need to prove that they're wrong.
Yeah.
But if they're right,
Mhm.
then they're going to be good for a long time, because they'll still be right in years to come, you know.
Mhm. It's fantastic. So I'm sure that, while you're doing dowsing, that you're going to pick up on other energies there as well.
Yes, yeah, it opens a whole can of worms, because I think I don't know if I explain it in the program. As an archaeologist, what I tend to do is I douse through my feet, and it's a little bit more like psychometry. So if you walk into a field, you kind of you visualize where things are. You know, you can almost see them. Now, some people would argue that's years. That's like half a century of experience there. That
Which you
tells
have.
well, it
Yeah.
tells you where people would put things. You know, it's that simple. But then there are other issues where it's not that simple. I'll tell you a story. I mean, we've gone slightly off topic here, but nothing to do with lost treasures. But I was on a dig site with my team. There were 3 of us that were dowsers. One guy works for the Manchester Dowsers. I'm a dowser, and then the guy that's actually in charge of the site, he's a dowser as well. So we've got to douse a tennis court. Now, a grass tennis court is about as flat and featureless as it's humanly possible to get. There's nothing, no clues whatsoever. And it's been a tennis court for a long time. So I go on there and I'm like, right, okay, I think there's a roundhouse in the far corner. So the other guy goes on, he went, no, I think you're completely wrong. There's something in the middle here. There seems to be a temporary building with a wall and an enclosure. Anyway, the third guy goes on and he's like, nope, you're both completely wrong. It's the other corner and there's a stone building. There's the foundations for a stone building. So the only way we were going to solve this was to just cut a trench right across that end of the tennis court, which we did. And you know exactly what I'm going to say here. There was a roundhouse in the corner. There was an enclosure with a ditch and a building in the middle, and a stone one in the other one, stone foundation in the other corner. So all 3 of us picked up on whatever it was that...
You were technically all right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were all correct, but we were all picking up on different things. Displacement in the electrical field, or damp, or dryness, or, you know, whatever it is that's in there that you know, triggers human reaction. Muscular or spiritual or electrical, that was working differently for all 3 of us.
Well, because we ourselves are like, energy receivers and conductors, and right. I mean, a lot of people, I always say, like Wayne, like my Wayne here, he'll walk over. He's just like a little body detector when you're going around and certain, like, we'll be in older places and he stops. I'm just like, he goes,
yeah, that's what I do. That's basically what I do. In fact, there's probably a couple of occasions somewhere in those 22 episodes where I do that.
Yeah,
I was renowned for doing that, and an awful lot of what appeared in the final series, I have to say, is one take. So if something happens, it happens for real, because we shot it as newsreel, so it's shot on the hoof, which is very unusual. A lot of it is not scripted, because it's news and current affairs. You can do that, you see.
Yes.
So if you see it, if it's in that program, trust me, it's real. And some of the reactions we get from the people we interview and things like that, that's 100% as it appears. You know, we didn't run them all through it first and then come back to them later.
No, I like it because it just gives that little bit of a different twist, which we're going to save a lot of this for a show that's coming up in February, guys, just so you know. So we're going to be delving into some crazy stuff then. But anyway, so for now, I found the church to be really fascinating. The architecture, the knights, everything. I mean, now, if memory serves me correctly, did you know who he was?
Who, the knight?
Yeah.
There you go. No, one of my favourite bits actually does revolve around the knights, and it's when I'm talking to the historian, because obviously we're on the hoof, we're shooting live, so like I say, nothing's done twice. So the old guy, who's now sadly passed away, he'd been the historian for 60 or whatever years for the church, and he was there when they came to fix some of the problems that were under the church building. And there's that wonderful story where he says, the builders had opened the trapdoor, they'd gone down into the royal crypts where, all the nobility and everything's kept, and they were just poking around, doing it themselves. So the guy who was in charge, the guy representing the church came in and said, "No, you're going to have to shut this down, lads. You can't carry on." But then he went on to describe there's lead coffins down there, there's knights' burials down there, there's he just honestly, and he does it on camera. And that's nobody had ever heard that story before, because he was there. He was there when they opened the trapdoor. It's first hand, straight out the horse's mouth. Incredible.
So there's all these knights, and of course you don't really know who these people were.
Well, one of them is the Deducton Chapel, I think. So you've got one family in there, and then the other one, I think, was the Lime family. So they're in there. So, you can roughly work out from the monuments, who's in the left-hand chapel and who's in the right-hand chapel. But like you say, once you get down there, you're faced with a rack of these, lead boxes or wooden boxes or whatever. Unless you were to spend some serious time, you wouldn't know who was in any of them, But, and this is the point, I suppose, they are there. They are definitely there. You don't have to put any micro cameras down or try and geophysics or anything like that. I was chatting to a guy who saw them. So, firsthand.
So now officially it's documented, which is
we
more than what many locations get, right?
Yeah, we've got a very solid record of what's there. I'll tell you what, though, we didn't find the treasure. We went looking for the treasure because the first half, it's the prehistoric stuff. So we came all the way up to St. Oswald's Well, which is it's the oldest sacred site basically in the whole of this northern part of England. It's like 1,600 and whatever years old. It's the oldest site. So we went into quite a lot of detail with that. But when we get past St. Oswald, the next kind of big thing is the Battle of Winwick, which is the English Civil War battle. And Oliver Cromwell basically hated churches. He hated all this iconography and stuff because he was a Protestant. So he put his horses into Winwick Church. He stabled them there. Well, while he was there, the church treasure disappeared. It vanished. So we leave it on a cliffhanger because nobody knows where that's hidden.
That's just crazy.
Could still be in the building. Could still be in the building somewhere.
So nobody knows. See, it's always cool when there's a treasure and you just don't know what the treasure is. We used to be told that about our manor house. There's a treasure buried in the house, and we'd be like, great. And then a spirit came through, and it was a lady of the house came through with a medium. And she says, "Dear, the house is a treasure." We're like, come on.
Well, yeah, I mean, our TV series is called Lost Treasures. So the whole thing's about treasure.
Exactly.
You get to the end of the first episode, and it finishes on treasure. It's like, yay! This is another great bit at the end as well. There's a wonderful sequence where you got this guy winding the clock, because there aren't many church clocks over here that still have to be hand wound. So we film the whole sequence, and then he's up on the top, of course, he's on top of the tower. So you get this wonderful view that members of the public will never see. And most people will never see that clock, and certainly never see it being wound. So, that first episode is just one thing after another, and it just blows the lid completely off it. And it's got my favourite bit in it as well. I mean, it's nothing to do with the story, but we're talking about the Battle of Makerfield. And you've got King Oswald, and he drops and he claws for his sword. And, you've got all these kind of movie standard bits that we kept putting in, the movie quality stuff. And there's this great shot of the skyline with all these guys with shields. And it's only a split second. It only comes up for about 20 odd seconds. And all of them just go, like that, and all the shields come round, and they all do it perfectly together. And that is a moment. That is definitely a moment in that episode. So if anyone wants to watch out for the shield wall, the Anglo-Saxon shield wall, because that's phenomenal. That's a great piece.
I think sometimes it's the history, which is a treasure. When you find things that you're never going to see again. That's like, you got to see things. That's what I've always liked about filming, is that you have access to locations and things that nobody else, is made privy to. So it's very humbling, and it's quite a privilege to be able to get into some spaces that would.
Well, when I used to go on set, when I used to go doing things and appear in that costume, I used to say to people, "That's not really me. That's the other guy. That's the man in black. He's a character. He is a character. I developed him as a TV character. But when I'm in character, Nobody can say no. And we actually proved it in practice, because I used to, they used to send me in to get permission. And I used to get us in everywhere. Didn't matter where it was. I stood in the, there's the Catholic Cathedral in Liverpool, and there's all the altar bit and all that's fenced off. And I managed to get permission to stand on the X where the Pope stands.
Wow, geez, aren't you lucky?
Nobody's allowed on that.
Boy.
I still managed to get on there for filming, but there's only one occasion. There was one occasion when I, for some reason, the producer guy, he said, "Oh, I'll sort this out. I'll go and talk to the farmer. I'll fix it." So we're up at like the River Ribble, where the Curdale hoard, all this Viking silver was found, up near Preston. With there, and he goes, "Right, I'll talk to the farmer. No trouble." Anyway, the farmer saw him coming. This producer guy, you know, all like dressed up in his suit and everything, saw him coming and set his dogs on him. He's like, "Oh, go and get him, Fido," and then just blanket banned us. So when the producer came back, he went, "You know what? I'm never doing that again." He said, I'm never doing that again. He said, "Any kind of permission, you can go and do it." And so I mean, by season 2, he should have learned his lesson. You know, by season 3, he pretty much left us to it, because he had issues and other productions and things he needed to deal with, and he'd realised at this point that I'm a director, so I could just get on with it, you know. So 3 is essentially nearly all me. Season 2 is like 70-80% me, and season 1 is about maybe 60-40. You know, he gets the lion's share, and I get the, because at that point we're still trying to work it all out, you know. And when it was commissioned as well, it's also worth noting that when we went in there, the discussion we had was, you know, why, when we've got so many movies, you know, you've got things like Raiders of the Lost Ark, you've got Tomb Raider, you know, you name it, the list just goes on and on and on. Why, when they're so enormously well done and they're so interesting, you know, they're so, why is there not a TV series doing that? So right from day one, and my argument was, you know, all these kids that used to run around with swords and guns, and kids love cannons, they love, you know, fighting and knights in armor and all
staffs.
that.
My kids were always like staffs and not swords.
And all that, yeah. We did an episode with Lord of the Rings. We did all that sort of stuff. We did King Arthur, another one. So I'm like, well, let's do it. Let's just do it. You know, let's not argue about this. Let's get the reenactors in, and we'll do it like a movie. So we had full-on CGI. We had full-on movie special effects. We had full-on like acted sequences and everything right from day one, and we just did it. And ITV were kind of sat there going, "Do you know what? We have no idea how you do this for the budget." Well, it's because we're bringing all our mates in, you know, like,
exactly.
You want a whole load of cannons going off, right? We'll get that, you know, we'll arrange that. But everybody wanted to do it. I mean, by season 2, we'd nicked half the experts off Time Team. You know, people were literally queuing up to appear in it, and it was so exciting. I mean, you can see I'm getting all kind of, you know, getting back in the swing of it now. It's firing me up. But it was 5 years in total of just full-on excitement. You know, you didn't just make it, you lived it, and that comes through. That definitely comes through in the final series.
Oh, it's incredible. The UK is just loaded with incredible history, incredible structures. Just, I mean, it's endless. You could still be going with the amount of stuff that's
it's just no end to it. There's absolutely no end to it. I mean, we'd got enough episodes to do a season 4. The reason that came to an end was that they actually changed the entire nature of television. So ITV were moving away from independent production houses, producers, and then the time slots they had available. We started out wanting to be an hour an episode, and they gave us half an hour an episode. By the time we got to season 4, they were talking about 15 minutes. And we just literally, I think we stopped.
Commercials after that. Yeah, that's all they want.
We stopped at exactly the right point, because it is what it is. You know, you wouldn't change Thunderbirds, or you wouldn't change Bagputt, or you wouldn't all these other like cult TV shows are what they are. So we just stopped. And it's interesting, because at the 3rd season, the very last episode, which is Manchester, we deal with the ultimate lost treasure, which is what happens when you die. That's the end. Where'd you go? Where'd you go after that? There's nowhere else to go, you know. So
that's incredible.
It just naturally felt like the right place to stop. That's not saying that, you know, if I don't get the phone call off Sky and they want another series, you know, there's plenty of scope. As you say, it'll go on forever. You can go on forever. There's so
much. There's so much. So let's get into episode 2, Sacred Saints and Cave Chambers.
Okay, this is
That one sound that was just the title was exciting to me. Sacred Saints and Cave Chambers, which to me is even the most exciting. Caves, chambers.
Well, we filmed 1 and 2. Those 2 episodes we filmed back to back. And one of the little bits of trivia, if you watch very carefully, some of the shots in episode 2, my coat's fastened. And I'm walking around with it fastened. Probably most people don't even think twice about that. The reason for that was the rest of the costume wasn't finished yet.
Oh.
So we're still waiting for the waistcoat and all the other stuff to arrive.
Right.
So that's why that's going on. But yeah, we filmed those 2 back to back, and we've been working on a site at Llynarmon in Yal, which is in Wales.
I couldn't even pronounce it, so I was waiting for you to say it.
Yeah, well, the Y end, the bit is yin,
right.
And then IL is Llynarmon in Yal. It's in Yal run together. And we were filming there because that's where we did a lot of archaeology. And some of the archaeology we did, we put that in the trailer. The actual, if you go and find the extra for season 1 with Drake, Michigan, which is where they're hosted, you'll find the original trailer, and it shows some of the footage of us digging in the cave at Llynarmon. And that footage, of course, then made it all the way through to the final TV series. So it's a great, honestly, the location's spectacular. It's kind of Norman. It's got this, it's castle, it's keep, it's Norman church. There's mysterious hidden treasures. It picks up on the stone monuments again. That runs through it as a thread. But the cave, there's a story that doesn't appear in the show, but I've got to tell you because it's typical. We were on that site. We were digging on that site, I think, in total for about 12 years. That's a long time to be on an archaeological dig.
It is, absolutely.
And we shifted
crazy
hundreds of tons of limestone chippings out of that cave. You know, we started going where we thought it would lead us somewhere. There's that wonderful moment where we break through into a cave chamber that's been sealed since the Ice Age because all of this debris blocked it. And we hand the camera into our speleologist. We had a really skinny lass that went in who's a caver, and she films it. And that footage, literally, that's the first time anybody's seen that since the end of the Ice Age. That's like a every hair on your body stands on end moment, you know. The last day that we dug, she was digging in there at the back, and she fell through into a cavity. It opened up. There was just in front of her like a little window of darkness. And she said she does what everybody does, threw a stone in. And she said it was ages, just before you got the bang where it is the bottom.
She's fortunate. She didn't go all the way.
Well, that's the cave. That's the big cavern. We had about an hour left on the last day. So we had to block it up and back out and leave it.
You couldn't go in it. Oh,
it's still there. We couldn't do anything with it. We found what we were looking for, and we know it's there, but nothing we could do with it.
So you couldn't even like go cable down and see?
No. She got a torch because you're on She said it was like the gravel went up to the cave wall, and at the top of the cave there was a little opening in the gravel, and she shone a torch through it and got nothing. She never hit the other wall. No stalactites, no stalagmites, no opposite wall, nothing. So it's huge. There's an enormous hole on the other side of this debris. And she said it was because the debris was quite solid. So presumably it's either on a ledge or there's a big slope. But when she dropped this stone in, she said it was a good couple of minutes before she heard a clack. And when she heard the clack at the bottom, it was a long way down. Heck of a long way down. But then she blocked it all back up and backed out. And that's all we could do. Couldn't do any more.
I guess not. So who knows?
What a moment, you know.
There'd be a whole other ecosystem down there.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what's down there? You know,
right.
Because some of the caves are natural and some of them are dug out. So there's potential for an enormous amount of activity in that area. At the other end of the scale, though, we were sat in the pub one night talking to this guy who was in his 80s, and he told us a story because he said, "Right, you're at one end of the valley." He said, well, right down at the other end of the valley, this is outside the village of Llynarmon. He said, go back about 20 or 30 years, he said. So this was about 40 years ago. He said, my son, when he was a youngster, was poking around the rocks down there. And he said there was a sheet of rock, if you like, that looked like it was part of the rock face. But to the left and right, this little lad noticed there was a gap. Now, he was small enough to squeeze through one of these gaps at one end. So
I was going to ask you, was there another entrance somewhere?
Well, this is where it gets uber exciting, because he squeezed through the gap and he had a flashlight with him. Spent a bit of time in there on his own, because that's what he was. Came out, and when he came out, he said, "You're not going to believe this. It's full of cave paintings."
Oh my God, petroglyphs.
Yeah, he said it's like the caves at Lascaux in France. He said it's all painted inside. He said there's animals and handprints, and now at this point, like 40 years ago, there is no prehistoric artwork anywhere in the UK. There's none. There is now, because at Cresswell Crags they've got some line drawings which date back to post-Ice Age. So we're looking here at a post-Ice Age Northern European cave that apparently has got some proper artwork in it.
And hasn't anybody gone back to explore this area?
No.
Okay. So
I mean,
crazy.
the way it tends to operate with the locals in that area, which is where we were really lucky, because most of the locals will not tell you anything. They won't talk to you. They're not interested, but we're, as a unit, when we were digging, we were not commercial. We were working for the landowners and for the site owners. Absolutely, we were meticulous, in everything we did. And we were feeding stuff back to my old university, Liverpool. There was a lady down there that was doing the botanical side of it and analysing the bones. So it was a great thing to do. So the background that you don't see on camera, there's so much more there for that episode that you don't realise is going on in the background. But what an amazing episode. Absolutely phenomenal.
Wow.
Again, because of what's there,
Yes, but that's me. There's that treasure. To me,
yeah.
Okay, it's just me, but I'd be out there at night and I'd be trying to get in that place. I would be. Get me a little shovel, just try to inch my little derriere through those little crevices to try to get in.
Well, the one
that's amazing. That's history.
Yeah. Well, the one we found at the front end, the one we actually found on our own site, that's been backfilled for safety, obviously.
Yes.
The other one we never found. We couldn't locate it. I mean, but the landscape changes. I mean, 40 years is a long time. The trees could have grown and blocked it, and you would never know it's there. But at least now somebody knows it's there, because I've told you. And
everybody's going to know it's there.
So, people in Glenarman now could possibly see this and go poking around, see if they could find it.
Yes.
I very much doubt the old guy I spoke to is still alive. I would very very much doubt that now.
It's a shame, because
1990s.
That was the link, that was the link. But I mean, I wonder what about his son?
Well, his son might still be alive, but his son didn't talk to us. So I don't know where... where that's
where do you look anymore? Yeah.
But wherever we go, we tend to find things. I mean, it's called Glenarman because of St. Garman. So the village is known to be the village of St. Garman. And the two things that we discovered that nobody else had featured is when we were digging on our archaeological site, we actually unearthed a well. Now, Garman's well is famous because St. Garman is the guy that's involved with Vortigern before King Arthur. So you're right into the sort of legends of Arthur with him. But he's a recognised saint, he's a proper saint. His well is about 2.5 miles further up the valley. But what we think has happened is that's the fake, and the one we've dug up is the real one. The actual Garman's well for the village is the one down in the valley that we feature in the show. That was the first discovery, because that had only been archaeologically excavated, a few years before we filmed. The second one was chatting to the bloke that has the church, the actual chapel. And he just off camera, he just went, I've got to show you this. He said, but I'm really not supposed to. Not allowed to show you this at all, but I'm going to. Do you want to turn your camera on? So there's a little bit in the middle of the episode where you see a statue, an ivory statue of St. Garman, studded with diamonds and rubies, holding his staff. They'd found that in a secret compartment in the church.
Come on.
And that's the first time anybody had seen it, because they won't tell anybody that they've got it, Now, I can tell you because it's in the programme. The guy who was the caretaker said, go on, sod it, you can have it, feature it kind of thing. So we were like, yeah, all right then. He said, the only thing you can't do is just don't tell anybody where we store it. So I'm still not telling you where it's kept.
Of course.
So
not.
you
Yeah.
can go nick it, you know. But he allowed us to put that on camera. Everybody else would have been forbidden to even know it existed, you know. And that's the level we were at. You know, people were literally opening the doors, opening up, you know, the crypts, the basements, the lofts, the garden shed, you know, wherever they've got stuff. And kind of throwing these things at us, going, hey, you need to see this, you need to see this, you need to see that. I remember on one occasion running across the cemetery and jumping over a garden wall because somebody had a commemorative medal they wanted to show us on camera. That's in Thelwall. And these medals are super rare, super, super, super rare. And she actually, I think she had two. She got two of them. So they went into that program.
Right. It's amazing. It's somewhat like, you know, when we were doing the last show and you had made reference to how many books sit in private collections that have incredible information. I think this is sort of the same thing because one thing I have learned from watching all these archaeology shows, which you don't have to be
the easy watching. Yeah, the easy watching.
Yeah, but you still don't have to be like a brainiac to make note of the fact that any place you are in the ancient world, the chances of uncovering something, hi Richard, is probable. And in the UK, you know, I mean, people are coming out like, oh, I just dug this out of the garden. Oh, this is just found this out in the back farm. You know, like the Viking hoard found in England, you know, and they were going on and on and on. It was just like the gift that kept on giving. It's like, oh, are you kidding? It's like a farmer. It's like, yeah, dig in.
Well, it absolutely bewildered me why people had not done it before, but nobody had done a TV series. Instead of going off to the museums, you know, and the private libraries and the big stately homes. I mean, we did a fair bit of that, but what about the ordinary, like you say, the ordinary man in the street, you know, the farmer who's got a carved head in his back garden and, you know, somebody who's got something in the basement that's really interesting, or Roman remains in the corner of the garden and all this kind of stuff. Well, nobody had done that.
Well, let me ask you this, just to make it like official. Maybe some of these people don't come forward with it because they're afraid it will be taken. So when things are found on people's private properties, does, you know, the county or the area or the country itself, the crown, come in and go, yeah, mine, gone?
Well,
maybe that's why they're hoarding it.
Broadly speaking, if you have something that is ancient, the answer's no. People do not automatically come and, you know, confiscate it or whatever. It's like farmers. Farmers are terrified if they find anything on the fields because they're terrified they won't be able to farm it. So that doesn't happen. What does happen is if it is actual treasure. So if it's gold, silver, or ancient metal, then you're supposed to hand that, or meteorites, believe it or not, you're supposed to hand them into the crown because they are treasure. They do count as treasure. But the argument there is that, well, maybe more people need to see it. 9 times out of 10, if it's gold or silver or whatever, if it's only one item or a couple of items, you'll get handed them back because they're of no particular significance, you know. But if it is significant, and we've had a few, but
he got to keep half, I think, didn't he?
Well, if you end up getting paid, it usually splits between yourself and the landowner. But if you find something and you are the landowner, then, you know, you get to keep all of it. That's when things are acquired for the nation. But there is a very specific process behind that, you know. And it's extremely rare that people find something that then becomes so significant that somebody like a museum would want it. It does happen.
The sword. Let's say, you know, you there's all these accounts throughout England and ancient world. Look, I found a sword in the river. Yeah.
Well, in that case,
like especially substantial, like a Templar sword, like a Viking sword, like a Roman sword.
Tell somebody. That was I through the whole season, the whole series. I would go around saying to people, tell somebody, because if you end up throwing that into a cupboard somewhere and forgetting the fact that you've got it or whatever, you may as well have not bothered digging it up. It's lost again.
Okay.
And in some cases, some of those things will decay, they'll deteriorate and disappear. The number of times we had interviews with people where they'd said, oh, we had this, blah, blah, whatever it was, but it turned to rust or it turned to powder. It just disappeared. And there's not even a photograph. There's just no evidence whatsoever that they ever found it,
Wow.
One of the real clinching finds we had on one of the dig sites, we had a dinosaur footprint. That totally rewrote the entire history of Britain. It was an amazing dinosaur footprint, but they had no idea how to look after it. Now, if they'd have just picked that up, marched it into the house and left it in a centrally heated environment, all we'd have now is a bucket of sand. It would have just gone, and that would have been it. It would have disappeared. But what we did was we actually taught them, we told them how to preserve it in a way that it will stay pretty much as it is forever. And it's above ground, and it's out of the ground now, so that needs to be preserved. So it is quite important. It is quite important to let people know what you find, and get some of the experts involved to preserve these things, and then try and find out how significant what you have actually is. I mean, it's that classic, isn't it? I've just dug up the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah, fantastic. What we're going to do? We're going to use them to light fires. We're going to kick them all the way around the desert. We're going to split them all up, chuck them in the backs of camels, try and sell them, sell them at auction while they're turning into powder, and greatest find of all time. And you just end up with so many millions of fragments because ordinary people didn't know what they were doing with them, That's probably the worst example I know, actually, of stuff.
No, but I think you're onto something with that. I think there are a lot of really incredible pieces out there that need to be preserved, and I think if you can work with your government, if they're like, no, you're fine with all of this, like we don't care. I think if the government could take a step back and say if it was something substantial, like when they found Richard under the parking lot, and it's just like there's a crown. Okay, we got to take the crown. Because, it's ours in the first place. But
I've got to say, by the way, even experts get it wrong. That's a great example. There's that woman, using a pickaxe to dig him out, and it goes straight through the top of his skull. Oh, I do not. I ban pickaxes. I do not allow them on any dig sites. They're banned because they're so hard to control. And she goes and puts a pickaxe through the preserved head of Richard III. It's like, So
yeah. I mean, handle with care, proceed with caution, because this is still, it's very significant history. I mean, you look at the ones that they're digging up, like sarcophagus. They're just digging down, and wasn't there something recently where, and I don't know if this is accurate or not. There's so much stuff floating around, but I subscribe to a lot of archaeological, different, emails that come in, because I love to read about it. Did they just find what they believe is a tomb of Gilgamesh?
I think that potentially that is a CGI setup.
Okay. Because they came through one of these sites, and I was kind of like, what? Really? That seems a little bit of a far stretch, but okay.
I'm not going to name them because I'll name and shame them, but there is one archaeology site, and every second or third story is made up. It's rubbish. Shame. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
The reason they're talking Gilgamesh is they want the Babylonian, the idea that Babylonians maybe had alien connections, and these aliens come down.
Sumerians.
No, I've seen the footage for that, and it's rubbish. It's nonsense.
Well, there we go. Don't believe everything you read, people. I looked at it and I thought, I usually send you the interesting things. Look what they just found your way. But it's very fascinating. So let's get back to the cave chambers, ice age caves. And then they have the chandelier history, the effigies in the church. Like, there's a lot in this whole segment that, I'm like, I need to be here.
Yeah.
I want to be in the cave.
Well, that's a good example of where a location gives up a huge amount of stuff from a very small area. Glenarman is well worth a visit. If anyone wants to go down to the village there and have a look around. Sadly, the pub's not there anymore, the Raven. That closed down.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, it closed down. So we got on really well. We'd spent years, dropping into that pub, but it's gone. It's gone the way of all things, so... But it's well worth having a look around the village. There's enough there to make it worth a visit.
Wow. So tell us about the medieval chandelier. The fact that it even still exists, to me.
Well, That was a wow moment. We were just filming in there, as you do, and me being the way that I am, I'm looking at that chandelier and I'm thinking, that's a lot older. It's older than the building it's in. What's going on with this? So I just happened to mention to the caretaker, I said, that chandelier doesn't look like it belongs in here. And then all of a sudden he just lit up because clearly, he knew
Lit
that,
up.
yeah, literally came to life. And next minute,
I had to go there. Sorry.
Next minute, he's stood on the pew and he's pulling the arms off this thing, and he's like, "Oh yes, this is 13th century. It was taken from Valley Crucis Abbey and it, relocated here." But nobody else had noticed that. He's had dozens of people go through that church. And unless you're an archaeologist or a medievalist or whatever, you would think it was a copy. You would think it was, something from the Art Deco or Art Nouveau period, early 1900s. But I just took one look at it and I thought, that is not a copy. That is the real deal, And then the next minute, he's taking it apart. He's handing pieces of it to me.
I'd have been mortified. Like, oh, no.
Yeah, I was like, it's like handling the crown jewels, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And that was a great moment. That was a lovely moment. He was a fabulous guy, fantastic guy. He really was.
Yes.
He's probably not still with us anymore. Because again,
That's
he
sad.
was.
I keep forgetting how far back this series was.
20 years, 20 years.
So these people would not be
if he
there.
was 70 or 80 back then, he's like 90 or 100 now.
Right. So. Yeah. But you touched on something very important, I felt there, which was the era of treasure hunting by the Victorians, which was pretty, it went. Ancient Egypt had a lot of issues in that time. I think places all over the world. So how many things got just grabbed up and put in museums illegally or sitting in private collections somewhere? I know what the fascination is as far as the Victorians and the macabre and the spirituality and seances, and what was the fascination with treasure hunting? Who doesn't want to? But it was a movement, like it was over the top.
Well, the technical term is antiquarians. The antiquarians came out of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a sort of scientific, educational kind of movement that occurred in the 1700s. So that's in the 18th century. And it was all these people with time and money, etc. They wanted to go on the grand tour. They wanted to go off and, go around the world and what have you. That's when the souvenir hunters begin. That's when they're bringing stuff back all the time, which I have to say is the foundation stones of most museums. Those private collections go on to form some of the biggest museums we've got in this country and probably worldwide. But then by the time it got to the Victorian era, of course, more people can do it on a much bigger scale. So you get kind of Tomb Raider looting, but on an industrial scale. Napoleon, when Napoleon went through Egypt, he just cleared the place, and it all ended up either in the Louvre or, in the case of like mummies, they used to produce a powder called mumia. They'd grind them up and sell this powder as a medicine. So I'm going to really shock you now. I mean, they were going through like 30,000 mummies a year.
Oh my God.
So when you realize that what the statistics and the scale of it was, when you understand how touchy the Egyptians are now, they really, really are super fussy about what you're allowed to do in Egypt. Absolutely uber fussy. And everyone goes, oh, that's because, they're a bunch of...
No, they're still trying to get a hold of some of their antiquities.
They're trying to get control of the situation.
They're trying to get control of their antiquities back. I mean, I met a guy named Billy Jameson, who was this side of the world in Canada. And he actually spent a lot of time in the South American jungle spent 5 years with the tribe. They showed him how, you shrink heads. I'm thinking, you're actually still shrinking heads. He goes, yeah, it was crazy. So anyway, he and partners ended up buying, because he had a show. I filmed with him. Also something about like obscure treasures and things, but they ended up buying the old Niagara Falls Museum of Oddities. There were 8 mummies that came out of there. So this was already there. In fact, I have a peacock back here that came from there. So he's really old, 1800s. I love it. But out of those 8 mummies, one of the museums in Atlanta bought 6 of them. Out of those 6 was Ramses the First.
Yeah.
Ended up in the Museum of Niagara Falls, Oddities Museum. And Zahi Hawass was just like, because this museum knew they had a royal mummy, and Zahi Hawass knew it was from the Ramses family.
Yeah.
Issued him a passport and brought him home. But to show you, when you're honest, they gave him back, no problem. I guess the other mummies were, I don't know if they all went back or it was kind of inconsequential. But, he said because of your honesty and being forthcoming and returning him, they actually get, like, if I'm not mistaken, first dibs for like so many years or for life as to which traveling Egyptian artifacts, who gets it first and for how long.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of incentive, people, if there's anybody listening in that position. But it's one example of, like, God, it's a freaking King Ramses the First ends up getting grabbed and brought across the pond and stuffed in a museum.
It's funny, the whole sort of antiquities, archaeology. It's a funny business.
Yeah.
Because those people who are unscrupulous and criminal that kind of do things they're not supposed to do don't necessarily get away with it. It's a massive gamble now to go down that route. But people still do, because they blame it on history. Well, we've done this for like 250, 300 years. We're not going to stop doing it now. But then on the other side of the coin, if you're one of the good guys and you do the right thing, then it's still one of those industries where doors open. Some industries you can do the right thing and it doesn't really make any difference. Nobody cares. It's not like that in history and archaeology. It's totally the opposite to that. If you're open and you make a big discovery, and it's an archaeologist or a historian is duty bound to credit the finder. So at the very least, your name will go into the historical records as the finder of some significance.
Which to me is like that's an eternal thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. You're written into history. You're up there with the greats if you find something significant. So it doesn't make sense to me to hide stuff. No, it really doesn't.
No, for sure. I mean, sometimes what may seem inconsequential in that moment, like you say, it just tells so much about the area. Everything that you dig up has consequence. It has merit. It has a story to tell.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, let's get into, and this is something we're going to talk about in the future. For some reason, I thought we must have just touched on it, was the Lost Legion, Roman Legion. But I'm only mentioning that because we're going to talk about Lewis Carroll and also the Lost Roman Malfort.
Yeah, that's interesting one, that, because I only live down the road from Lewis Carroll's birthplace.
Yeah.
He was born in a little village called Daresbury in North Cheshire.
Alice in Wonderland, for those of you who don't know.
Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass and quite a lot of other books, but that's another story. So what we were doing was we were looking at Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass, because the church where his father preached and where he grew up to the age of 11 has windows, leaded windows with Alice in them. That's crazy. It's a great location. But so the church itself, the building, the site, the location of the family home, a lot of the inspiration for what appeared in his books, it's all there in that area. So it was a great area to explore. Yeah. And again, doing something with Alice in Wonderland is cutting edge. Nobody's really done that on location in this area like that. Yeah, they all go off to Oxford and do all that. There's loads of that. But looking at his childhood was different. Nobody would tackle that. And then lo and behold, when we were doing the programme, we discovered that when they extended the church in the Victorian times, they went straight through a pile of Roman concrete. So at this point, I've always suspected that at that location, there was something Roman. One of the St. Helens, the Roman roads that run through Wales, terminates at that spot. The saints that the churches are dedicated to, St. Helena's one of them. There's also a burh there. Daresbury means Dior's burg, and a burh is a Saxon fort. So it's the fort of Dior. And that's in a field. You can see it. It's an enormous great bump in a field. So we actually go into detail with that as well in the episode. We look at where all these Saxon forts are. And to the best of my knowledge, again, that's something nobody else has talked about. Nobody's actually looked at that, because locally they're just piles of earth. You know, people are like, yeah, I've got a bump in my field sort of thing. But nationally, it's the Danelaw. It's where the Danes versus the Saxons built this line of fortifications, and they've been trying to find it in that area around Daresbury. They've been looking for that boundary for 250, 300 years. They've had loads of antiquarians searching for it. And in the programme, we tell you where it is because we found it. So again, it was opening up the huge can of worms on things that people had never done before, you know, subjects that had never been tackled. So it was fascinating, because you go down the rabbit hole, literally. You go in at the beginning and you think it's all going to be Lewis Carroll, and then whoa, no, we're doing what we always do. We're off finding other things, you know. I enjoyed doing that episode because I get to get a bit sort of literate, you know. I don't the rest of it I'm just running around like a nutcase, but that one's quite nice.
Well, there's a lot of little hidden treasures found, and you know, the one, you know, when you're getting into that episode, I know it was like, you know, the second half, but something as simple as finding Roman concrete under a church. Concrete, because Romans are known for their concrete that lasted underwater and did amazing things. People would look at that and go, it's just concrete. No, that's really friggin' old concrete. It's like Roman concrete.
It is. Right? And the church they were rebuilding as well, that proved to be really old, because again, we went where public are not allowed to go. We went everywhere. We went into the bell tower. We went all the way around the foundations, the woodwork, the private chapels. We were all over the place. And there's a lot of evidence for Knights Templar, which they'd never spotted. They'd never actually looked at that. There's one block as well in a window, and it's just covered in graffiti. And when you first look at it, you think, oh, you know, it's going to be like, you know, Bob was here sort of thing.
Right.
You know, Terry loves Jenny and all this. But when you have a closer look, it's not that at all. The most recent graffiti is probably Elizabethan, so it's 500 years old. And then it goes backwards, because back into medieval times, there's medieval stuff on there and all sorts. And I don't even think they knew they had it. They didn't even know it was there. You know, it just... Once you get up there with a camera and you get a side light on it and you can film it, you can see what's actually written there. We showed the footage to the vicar afterwards, and he was like, wow, I've never seen that before in my life. Put
it behind glass.
Well, because it's in a window. The light from
part of the window, right?
Well, the window blows it out, so you can't see it.
Oh, right.
So you know, we were just falling over stuff wherever we went. And of course, that's the one with that cheeky little chubby green man that's just spewing out grapes everywhere. You know, which is, it's clearly a joke by the monks of the local priory, because that's where it came from. Because it's Bacchus. It's so obviously Bacchus.
Exactly.
You know, the Roman god of wine.
Put right in there.
Yeah,
which is like
and he's right next to the altar. Yeah.
That's funny. Question for you. Sherry says, Mark, have you ever had any spirit activity with items you've had?
Okay, that's objects that have spiritual reaction. The short answer is yes, but I'm gonna get a bit more specific than that. It's the sort of objects that I've had experiences with. For example, I own a crystal skull. So that's like asking for trouble, because for a start, it's made of quartz. You know, it's like a battery, and it's a real one. So who knows where that's been for the last 600, 700, 800 years? So that everybody, even me, I get a reaction off that. You know, you'd expect to get that. A lot of the archaeological objects, because I lean that way, I pick things up from the archaeological objects. You know, what she's probably thinking of in asking that question, though, is things like, you know, the haunted dolls. You put a doll in the room and all of a sudden the room goes nuts and everything starts happening. I'm going to say no to that. I've not had any, quote, evil or possessed.
Menacing things.
Those kind of objects might just be, because again, this is looking forward to next year, if we do an episode about
the
fact that I live in a haunted house. So this house is quite unique. So the objects you bring in here fit into the jigsaw puzzle that is the overall site, the overall building, the overall house. So something that might absolutely go mental if you put it, you know, in somebody else's house, it comes here and surprise, surprise, nothing happens.
I found that.
it just sits there as a part of everything else, you know.
Do you think it just because it reacts to people's energy? Because people give me their haunted items, and I'm expecting like chaos. And I sat there with a skull on my desk one time. I threw a baseball cap on, and we chilled the skull. Like, you're no trouble at all, really. It's like,
I've had a skull. In fact, I've got a Bronze Age burial in a bucket in there somewhere waiting analysis. So you get stuff like that. The obvious stuff doesn't seem to trigger anything off. But I've had things like Victorian funeral brooches, you know, the black ones.
I love those too. I love funeral pieces.
Well, one or two of them have been a bit creepy, you know, and there's bits like that where you're sort of floating that way. So the answer is yes, of course, there are objects that, you know, attract energies and things and make things happen. But the other side to that is it doesn't really happen here. It's not happened to me a lot. It's happened on dig sites. I mean, we've worked in properties and met people, and you know, there's all sorts. I mean, if you watch the whole 22 episodes, you'll find there's a few. There's a few in the Lost Treasures series that turn up. There's a great one in one hall. I mean, I won't spoil it for anyone that's not seen it, but he goes rooting in this cupboard to find a dried head. You know, there's a dried head hidden in this cupboard, and so and that causes things to happen. So
that's funny. So she says, so more or less psychometry.
Yes, psychometry is something that requires somebody to read it. So that's like, you know, is television really television if nobody's watching it?
Right.
So you're into that territory. You know, if you just brought, like, I'm thinking of Celtic heads, Celtic stone heads. They are renowned for causing trouble. If you get one of those, there's a few in the basement of the Manchester Museum, and people will not go in there because they are terrified of these stone heads.
And why is that? Is that because of their mindset, like the perception, or is it because stone actually retains energy and has its own frequency?
All I can tell you is that most people think it's because they're Celtic, because they've got this sinister druidic energy that's odd, and they have a personality and they don't like being moved. So wherever they go, they cause trouble. But then the question is, when they're just sat there, nothing seems to happen. You've got to have a person or something there that, you know, to be the catalyst. Psychometry, the argument with psychometry is that whatever it is, be it information or energy or whatever, is encoded in the object. That's the argument basically with psychometry. Whereas haunted objects attract things. So they're pulling the energy in from all over the place. So one minute they're haunted, the next minute they're not. You know, if they don't like where they are, you're in trouble. But if they're quite happy where they are, you get no trouble at all. They're just inanimate objects. That is on a different level to what I would call psychometry. You're dealing then with spirituality, poltergeist activity, ghosts, you know, paranormal. You're in a different area altogether. Psychometry is interesting because you can use it to date objects. You can pick an object up and hold it in your hand and it'll give you information, you know, because it's there all the time. It's permanently encoded in the object. I've got some great prehistoric objects that do that. You just pick them up. And in fact, I'll tell you a story. There was one lady who is a specialist in crystals. By specialist, I mean she actually goes out there and mines the things in Brazil. She knows more about the earth than anybody I know. And I set her a blind test. I put 12 rocks, that's all they were, pieces of stone on a tray, gave her a notepad and went, okay, knock yourself out, have a go. And she went through these, and, like, you know, some of them were, you know, a piece of gravel off the road outside, you know, but another one that looked exactly the same had been picked up off the top of the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, you know. So that's the kind of dichotomy we're talking about. Anyway, she got 100% of them right. She got all of them right. Yeah, she could tell the difference between furnace clinker and a meteorite, and that is honestly, that is really difficult, and that's just by holding them. She said,
I wear meteorite. Like I have 2 meteorite rings that I wear, and Hamilton White sent me a beautiful piece of meteorite from
this country,
Russia.
It's the bane of every archaeologist in this country, because when they did industrial processes, they would smash up the industrial rubbish. So like glass slag, iron slag,
it's worth a good chunk of money. Meteorite.
Well, they'd smash all that up and they'd put it on the farm tracks. Right. So when you go walking across the fields, you're picking up these great huge lumps of stuff that look like meteorites. But
I'll give you my address. Feel free to fire some off.
Well, they're not meteorites. They come out of the blast furnace, you know. The big lumps of melted, grotty, melted iron that nobody wants, you know. But, you know, people just keep bringing them in all the time. You know, what's this? What's this? What's this? And you're like, no.
Right. Don't do it. Don't do it. I imagine, aside from, I mean, you know, we got a lot of Roman stuff, Vikings.
Yeah.
You guys have a lot of really old Viking stuff. Because the Normans who came over, I mean, that comes out from my ancestry, the Normans coming in and being the bane of your existence in the UK, which is where my other ancestors are.
You've jumped to episode 4. We're on episode 4, Viking Raiders.
Yes.
And Lost Treasure Chest.
That's true. It is for it, right.
We've got tons of Viking stuff over here.
Yes.
I mean, when it came to the Vikings, actually, through the series, it got a bit silly because the first, I think that episode that we do, I start looking at the Vikings where they are, you know, because we've got this massive river, the River Mersey. I thought, well, the Vikings are going to be all over that, you know, so start looking at that. But then I ended up meeting a guy called Stephen Harding. He's a professor, internationally renowned professor, Professor Stephen Harding. His main thing is genetics. He's a geneticist. And he got stuck in up here in this part of the world to try and find out what traces of the Vikings were left. But as a consequence of that, he got a series out of the BBC. So basically what we did was we stole a star off the BBC to appear in Lost Treasures. And me and him got on like a house on fire. Honestly, it's fantastic. So many adventures, you know, from downing pints in a pub on the Mersey Valley, climbing up monuments and digging stuff up. And honestly, we went everywhere. But what I'm coming to is he's in that episode. He's in that Viking episode. And over the series, because you can imagine this is season 1. So the film crew are kind of, this guy does genetics, you know. I wonder if Mark Olly is a Viking, you know, that started. And then by season 2, because he's back again, because we just kept doing these Viking episodes with him, and he comes back again for another one. So this time the crew's like, you know, I'm pretty sure, he's a Viking. He dresses like Odin. He looks like Odin. He's got like a Viking beard. This something. He's almost certainly a Viking. So by the time you get to season 3, there's actually money changing hands. You know, it's like, I bet you 20 quid he's a Viking, bet you 20 quid he's not, you know, and this kind of thing. So the producer friend of mine actually talked to Stephen and said, look, we're going to do a DNA test. Let's do it. Let's get a DNA test. Find out for certain.
Here we go. Gloves off.
Whether you're Viking or not. So they sent the DNA test off, but the results didn't come back in time for us to wrap the series. So the series finishes, and the little bit that you see in season 3, where my results come back, is actually 3 months later.
Wow.
We've cut it back, edited it into the episode. So, and we went down there. We went down to see Stephen and set all the cameras up, and there's the screen, and there's another professor there called Mark Jobling. He did all the analysis on it. So we're all sat around the screen, and it was like, let's see what the results are. 1, 2, 3, and they push the button on the laptop, and bang, up come the results. And the reaction that you see is real, because none of us had seen it before. And do you want me to put a spoiler out there?
Do it. Do it. Do it.
Right, the spoiler is it came back, and it's like, categorically not a Viking. I am a Central European Celt. That's what I am. I've got most of the same DNA similar to Otzi the Iceman. There's no Viking in me whatsoever. So at which point I made quite a lot of money. The producer made quite a lot of money. Stephen made quite a lot of money, and the film crew just lost. The film crew just lost a load. So that reaction you get at the end of the episode in season 3 is real. But it just went on and on and on. And like you say, we started off with a notional idea that there was something out there that was Viking. You know, we kind of knew, but nobody had really done much with that. And as soon as Stephen comes on board, it just balloons. You know, we did 3, like I said, we got an episode in every series that focuses in on the Vikings, and that particular one is a good one. It's another belter, another absolute belter. Loads of fun.
I loved it. I love anything. You know,
I think is it that one where we go searching for the Battle of Brunanburh on the Wirral? I think it is that one. I think we finished up on the Wirral looking for the battlefield. And again, it was another case of we discussed it, we researched it. You know, we had the professor there with all his original documentation and all this and the other. And I think it ends where there's a bit of debate. They put metal detectorists onto the site to see what they could find, and they weren't really certain. Anyway, now 20 years further on, they're absolutely certain. So again, we got it right. You know, that's where that battle took place. There's no doubt about it, for the reasons that we say as well. So,
so what do you do when you find a full battlefield? I mean, I know that there, you know, other archaeologists show I still watch, which just dig a trench. Trenches everywhere.
Well, it depends which battlefield you're talking about. If it's kind of English Civil War, you know, as soon as they invented cannons, as soon as they could start blasting each other with missiles, then there's usually quite a lot to find on a battlefield if that's the case. So you can go back to the Wars of the Roses, you can go back to the 1480s, and there's still cannonballs. You can still find them because most people don't even know what they are.
Something like the Battle of Hastings. I mean,
nothing, absolutely nothing. But there's a good reason for that.
Okay.
If you imagine, let's say I'm a little Saxon peasant, and I live next door to the battle. If I can get onto the field and I can get hold of a sword, and I go and surrender that sword to the noble, the lord of the manor, that's worth a year's wages. So you can imagine what's going to happen. You know, you've got a battlefield covered in dead people. Next minute, it's covered in old ladies, old men, women and children, you know, people who are professionals like the blacksmiths and people that were bakers and, you know, cooks, and everybody that wasn't involved in the battle goes across that battlefield like a plague of locusts. So there's nothing left, not even the buttons on the tunics. Because if you think about it, everything that's on there has to be made. It's all got to be made by hand. It takes 3 years to make a suit of chainmail. So there's no way they're going to leave any of that behind. So what you tend to find with a battlefield, you might find the odd bit, you know, arrowhead or button, or, you know, you won't find anything of significant. Fragments of chainmail tend to turn up. You usually find the burials. Somewhere on that battlefield, there's a grave, there's a burial pit, which in one of the episodes on Chester, we actually have the archaeologist responsible for finding the oldest battle burial cemetery in Britain. And it goes back to the one of the Anglo-Saxon battles in 613 AD. And the only thing that was left was an earthwork and a pit full of skeletons. That's all we had. But that was another first. And the guy we talked to as well, it's the first time he'd ever talked to anybody on camera about that battle pit. And that's in one of the Chester episodes.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, you guys have to just be littered. Just littered with, you know, with these sort of battlefields and these pits. And, you know, everybody was always trying to get their hands on England.
Even the English were trying to get their hands on England. Yeah, they were coming from everywhere. Yeah,
it's true. So I'm going to put something out there. I thought it would be fun to talk about, which is the Stone of Destiny, the Stone of Scone, as they say.
Yeah.
I want to talk about it because I for a while represented a castle out here in Toronto, and I was like their paranormal representative, and they would tell me all the ins and outs. Right. So I'm like, okay, the house was built by a house, you know, I know, like 180,000 square foot abode. But anyway, but there was a replica throne from the 1800s, or I believe, no, early 1900s, with a stone, which was, they said, this is the Stone of Scone. And Here's the story. It's good. It gets really good, and I'm dying to hear what you have to say about it. Anyway, there have been a lot of stories about that. People have seen things around it, and 2 rabbis were visiting because it's a tourist attraction. People come in now and they can tour it. And he was Scottish. Okay, the owner, Sir Henry Pellet, was Scottish, and they requested to speak to, I guess, she would have been the official person at the castle who gave me all the information. And they said to her, there are 2 very powerful spirit guardians watching that stone. And she goes, that's interesting. I said, okay, can I get the backstory on this? And she said, here's the crazy thing. Okay, Sir Henry Pellet he owned the electric company down here. He was pretty much instrumental for assisting bringing electricity to the city of Toronto. He worked alongside people here in Niagara Falls area he had a lot of money. We're going to leave it at that. Had a lot of money, but lost it all, of course, through losing the castle to back taxes, fighting with his neighbor who owned the gas company. It was crazy. Anyway, he had a freaking heck of a lot of money. So the story goes is he was contacted by one of the largest museums in Toronto, which was the Royal Ontario Museum at the time. And they said, we have something you may be interested in that somehow has come into our possession. I don't have that whole story. They weren't given that whole story. He traded a very rare and expensive collection of medieval suits of armor for the stone. So he must have been convinced that it was the original stone. Then there's a story where the stone, I guess, got taken, broken, something, and this has got damage to it as well. Roughly the same. They are part of the same area, but not, it wouldn't be as bad as your stone. Let's put it that way. So what are your thoughts on that from an archaeology standpoint and a historical standpoint?
Right, okay. Well, the Stone of Scone, it begins as being produced by King David out in Israel. So it's interesting that you mentioned the Jewish connection.
Yes.
It's something that formed part of either a royal building or a royal location or a royal seat or something like that, owned by King David. It depends who you read and depends what people say.
Yes.
That stone apparently was brought to Scotland very early on, incredibly early on, to the point where as long as you can go back with Scottish kings, they go all the way back, the stone is always there. So 1,000 years, let's say 1,000 years ago, that stone pops up in Scotland. Now it's a very specific stone. It's the shape, the size, the weight, the fact it's got loops in it, the whole way that stone is arranged. It is really specific. Well, this is what I'm coming to. And it's dead specific. Now, this is where the story gets interesting, because obviously they were crowning kings in Scotland on this stone, believing it to be the Stone of David. That's what it's supposed to be. Might even have been at St. David's. That might be where that gets its epithet from. But, that's the kind of situation you're in. The English, under the Edwards, Edward goes up there and decides, right, we're not having this anymore. You're not crowning everybody else. And takes a stone, brings it back, and it finishes underneath a throne, a medieval throne, a genuine medieval throne in Westminster Abbey. That's the Stone of Scone, and it's sat there. Okay. But, this is where the but comes in. The simple argument goes, there is no way on God's earth the Scots would have surrendered the right stone. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
No, and Sir Henry was a Scot.
Well, right from day one, everybody in Scotland says it's a fake. That one in Westminster Abbey is nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. That's what they say. Now, what's interesting is, in recent times, Queen Elizabeth, before she died, sent that stone back to Scotland. It's been, reappropriated.
Yes.
So there's a big hole under the seat now. There's nothing there under the throne.
It only goes back for the coronation of a monarch. Is that correct? Like it moves back and forth? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now it's gone back permanently. It's permanently up in Scotland. So I don't know where they've got that one. But what they did do, and this is recent, this is 21st century. What they did when it went back, because it was out of the throne, they had the opportunity to CAT scan it and also to produce a computer topography model of it. And they did that in a lot of detail. So they managed to find out that the stone probably originates in the Middle East. It's probably from Israel. So the block is right. So the story that it was brought back by Crusaders, that's probably true. There's a lot of stone, like masonry marks and bits of knocks and blows and things on it and these hoops. All of that is later. So there's no evidence. They've not actually gone, yes, that's 3,500, 4,000 years old. We can tell you that from the tool marks. There's nothing on it they can date. There's no moss, there's no dirt, there's nothing you can carbon date, nothing. So they've got a really good idea that they've got a really posh, nice, old, medieval lump of rock. That's what it is. That's what most people think it is.
Yes.
So if you put that to one side, of course, the obvious question is, where's the real one gone? You know, there's a lot of debate in Scotland as to where it was hidden, but who knows? You guys might have the real one.
Well, I'll send you photos because
please do.
I mean, what would prompt a proud Scotsman to literally and he would, here's the kicker. Sir Henry's very connected. He went in for the coronation of the king and brought over the whole British regiment came and spent a year at this castle. And we went back with them for the coronation of the king back in the early 1900s. And so he had a connection out there. But what would prompt a man to donate, to trade a very expensive, authentic collection of suits of armor for a rock? I don't know. It's and the Jewish connection, that was interesting that these two rabbis would pick up on this, and they felt like the stone was very much watched over and protected. And they tell you right there when you go and you see the display, this is supposed to be, they don't claim that it is. Okay, this is supposed to be. And on the tour, it's the same thing. All right, Well,
I mean, in what you just told me, there is just a kind of, there's like a yes and a no, because he would also have had the opportunity to have a copy made. He's incredibly rich. He's got loads of contacts, and he's been over here, so he knows what the original one over here looks like.
It looks old. So, yeah. It's not like this beautiful white stone. It looks like it's got some good amount of miles on it.
Well, the one over here is very much the same as that.
And he had a replica, and again, very early 1900s, he had a replica throne made. And it's full of carvings from, I think, late 1800s or early 1900s. Yeah. So this came from, like, again, how much can you put? I look at the Smithsonian as sort of it's a kick in the butt for museums, for sure, when you think about that. But I mean, the ROM at the time was a very reputable. It's still known to be very reputable, as much as a museum can be, I suppose, So
I mean, they are working on a technique for dating stone.
That would be outstanding.
Well, what you do is you go back to wherever the stone comes from. So geologically, you identify the origin of the stone.
Yes.
And what they're working on is that when you cut the surface of the stone, from that point onwards, the stone begins to lose moisture. So if you've got the original source for it, so you have an original uncut piece, you can then compare that to the surface of the stone you've got and see how much moisture loss has occurred in that time. Now, at the moment, it's cutting edge. They don't know whether this system is going to work. They're just mucking about with it. But on a molecular level, it seems to stand up under the original idea, the original experiments they did with it. It does look like stone loses moisture from a cut surface at a steady rate. So if you can work out what the rate is, you can engineer the stone backwards and get a date.
That's very interesting. Yeah,
that's coming. That's coming. That's something for the future.
I will try to dig up photos that I took of this when I worked there, and you can give me your. I mean, it's in a chair, so I've only got so much access to it.
Well, yeah, there's a little square underneath the seat.
It is
with the hoops hanging out the side. Sounds like he's copied the chair in Westminster Abbey. The one in Westminster Abbey goes back to Edward. It's from the time he was trying to conquer the Scots.
It does. You'll see it. It'll be in the chair. But I loved the stories that were attached to it with visitors. Visitors would come in and see things around that throne. And there was no real explanation as to why there would be certain activity around the stone itself. But the castle itself was said to be haunted. So
when is a copy not as good as the original? It's like some of the copies that people have produced and reproduce the same effects that the originals do. And it's very hard when you're dealing with things like glass and stone and metal. It's very, very difficult to say, well, that particular stone doesn't do something, but that particular stone does. You know, it's like if you've got it right, if it's a really, really good copy, then chances are it'll function the same as the original. You know, if we mass produce objects nowadays, you know, we expect the new objects to work the same way as the old ones. Everything, you know, that kind of repeat pattern, so that everything works that way. And maybe this is a case of that, where you've got something that is such a good copy and it's made from the same material and it's been housed and venerated, protected and used in exactly the same way, then, you know, what you put in at one end, you get the same thing out the other. You know, maybe that's what we're seeing happening here.
I was curious as to your thought, because it's something I thought about when I was, you know, we were going to do a stint on archaeology and lost treasures, because this would definitely be a history changer and indeed a lost treasure.
Well, again, that's exactly how we found most of the things we featured in the program.
Yes.
And some of them are on a par with the Stone of Scone, you know. I mean, I was handling nails on a piece of wood that came off the Sutton Hoo ship burial, the Anglo-Saxon ship, that an old lady in Chester had kept in a drawer. Whoa, you know, so it's some of the things that popped up were not what you expected at all, you know.
No, and they're definitely in the most obscure places.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting story, because that lady was on some of the Sutton Hoo photographs. There are two little girls. They just stood on the side of the. Nobody really paid them any attention. You know, they're not any of the famous people. Just these two little girls. Well, the smallest of those two girls was this old lady that was in this old people's home. She was 98, and she was there. She was the last person on planet Earth to see the body of Redwald. She saw the ghost, the sand skeleton, and she watched it turn to powder. During the lunch break, it just went boof, just disappeared. She was the last person on planet Earth to see it. And we filmed that. That interview's in the program. It's there. She shows you the ship nails and everything else she's got. The piece of wood she's got is the only piece of wood I know in existence from that ship. So you could get a date off that. You could carbon date that. Anyway, when we interviewed her, which was back in whenever it was, 2004, 5, 6, of course, she'll be gone by now. That was 20 years ago. She's not with us anymore.
There's nobody, because, you know, I would say, like, so where do these antiquities end up? Like, I've tried to teach, you know, my offspring, whom I love, but I've tried to teach them the value of antiquities. I would buy antiquities for my kids growing up.
Yeah.
So they would always appreciate, you know, prehistoric things, or, you know, weaponry, very old weaponry. And they would know, you know, I would teach them how to care for it and what to do with it. But not everybody does that. You just don't know, where does it go? Ends up in a drawer, ends up in a bag, ends up at the Goodwill?
Who knows? Who knows? I mean, that particular case, the pieces that she had, she'd kept a scrapbook and she documented. So I'm assuming that's gone to the family. You know, that will not just disappear. Sutton Hoo ship burial over here is right up there with like Tutankhamun and all the rest of it. So those bits are not going to just vanish. But if you ask me where they are now, I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I've no idea where they ended up. So that's, you know, I mean, Lost Treasures was a great opportunity to record things like that that would otherwise be lost. But then it's still back to the conversation we had about value, where things end up, who gets to keep what, you know. We as human beings are only custodians of whatever we've got during our lifetime. And it would be nice to pass those things on to somebody then that can keep them for longer. You know, a museum, an archive.
I know I've got pieces that are sort of, you know, I had a very rare collection that I passed off to a friend. It was just very rare, but he has traveling pieces that go to different museums. So I thought it was fitting. But I have a medieval skull. I have a medieval skull that came out of the St. Elizabeth's flood of 1425, was it? Or 1465, something like that. And, you know, it was recovered in the 1500s, somehow ended up in the collection of a little old lady in England who had over 200 freaking skulls, apparently. So this ended up going to a friend of mine who's an antiquities dealer in Canada. And he goes, I think this one has your name on it. Because I say no to things all the time. I'm like, come on. Like I can't have everything.
Yeah, I have the same problem here.
Right? Things just come to you, right? But
Yeah.
I'm looking at this guy and I'm going like, yes, I am the caretaker. I will take care of you all for now. And, because I've got, I parted with one. I think I've got 4 left. And I've just got somewhere along the lines, it's going to have to go somewhere. And, I don't know if, my kids might kind of go, yeah, they're all adults now. They may not, but it's interesting. You need to think ahead for things like this.
Yeah,
right.
It's worth mentioning that if you do own something of significance, not necessarily value, but something of significance, plan ahead. Yeah, plan ahead. Put it somewhere when you're gone.
Well, it's got to go in the will. Okay, who? I have to always have a family meeting. Okay, who are the takers? Who wants what? And dole it out before I go, which is probably what will happen. So we're slowly. We've got 15 minutes left, and I have to keep it under the 2 hours because I've got to get this thing. The soundboard will not take anything, even a second over 2 hours. So
well, I can do the next 2 really quickly because we did Vikings. We touched on Vikings. That's episode 4.
Yeah, real quick.
5, we look at Knutsford, which is this amazing little village
I have a friend
in the middle of Cheshire, which is supposedly connected to King Canute, but actually it isn't. But it's renowned for finding prehistoric tools, Ice Age, post-Ice Age tools, which most people don't know. So that's the focus of that. And the only memory I have of that, it's one of those, it sounded like a good idea at the time. Oh, I'll tell you what, we'll go and film in Knutsford. It's underneath one of the runways. It's under the runway for Manchester Airport.
Wow, crazy.
So every 15 minutes, there's a plane going like that. So you'd have to get everything in one take.
Beautiful.
All the shots, if you don't want all the row, and airplanes everywhere. Some of them in the lunchtime, they were going off every 3 minutes. So the whole of that episode was just a complete nightmare, total nightmare to film that one. But I would recommend watching that if you're into prehistory, and potentially, there's I call out at the end. There's a flint tool that appears in this piece.
Beautiful. It was beautiful.
That turns out to be. It's not in the episode, so it's worth me saying it here. Well, that's in the episode. I call out. The lady that found this. The lady did actually come back. She came back the next year. She brought 2 more flint artifacts that were found with it in a cluster. And it turns out potentially that could be the oldest Venus figure in the world. Not just by a few thousand years, but by 210,000 years. So that is hugely significant.
I have a friend who's between 30 and 60, but 200 is pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, the oldest actual attested Venus figure, which looks
it's
like
phenomenal.
It looks like the one I'm thinking of actually looks a bit like a sort of blob of poo. It's not nice. Just a sort of blob thing with things carved into it. Wow. That's 32,000 to 33,000 BC. But the one we've got is 250,000, 260,000.
Impressive.
It's enormously old. So it's worth watching that one. And the very last episode is Chester, Strength and Honor. So that's Gladiator. That's our take on Gladiator. And there's a huge chunk of King Arthur in the middle of that, if you know where to look for him.
Yes.
And they're digging up an entire amphitheatre. So we've got this massive amphitheatre dig, biggest amphitheatre in the Roman world, in the biggest Roman city in the whole that was ever built outside of Rome. Biggest Roman forts, 11 acres bigger than anything else. And then we actually CGI it. It's like this enormous CGI of this.
It was really well done. Yeah.
Oh, so impressive, that last episode. So that's season 1. It goes out with a bang.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
It was good. Now, what's the website that it can be found on?
Right. What I did was, I've got some friends that run this platform called Drake Michigan. So it's Michigan, Michigan, and it's Drake, Drake. So it's Drake Michigan. If you go on there, there's a whole bar, if you like, of programs. They're all on there together.
All 3 seasons are there. I did find them.
Yeah, clustered under me. So you'll find bits. You'll find bits of them scattered across YouTube. But if you really want to get stuck in and you want all of the episodes, 22 episodes with the extras, that's where you go.
He's changed the website name to Speaking Spirituality with Drake Michigan.
Yes, he has. That's the thing, the subheading, if you like.
Okay, yeah. So that's what
yeah.
you guys have to look for, right?
Yeah. So they're a bit difficult to find, but it's worth it. Definitely worth digging in. I have to say as well, to conclude that first season, there were only 6 episodes because there's 8 in season 2 and there's 8 in the next one. There's only 6 in the first one,
Right.
and we actually were nominated. I'm gonna get this right for the popular feature program of the year, the ITV popular feature program of the year in 2005, and we came second, which is not bad for a first attempt.
That's not bad at all. That's a fantastic, actually. And I'll be watching the other ones just because now that I know where they are.
Yeah, go find season 2. Season 2 will blow your socks off, but season 3, some of my favorite episodes are in 3, but 2 will blow your socks off.
Oh, I'll
really
get to season 3, and then maybe we'll do a recap. There's just so many other things we want to touch on. So
well,
guys,
you could do this again for both. Do 2 and 3 maybe together.
I think so. Yeah, I think we can merge them. We certainly will. I have other plans though for whatchamacallit on Wednesday. Oh, thank you for putting it up, Richard. Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go. So with that being said, there we go. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Everybody, be in the chat room tonight. You will be watching this recording. I'll try to join you guys. It is the season, so I'm spread pretty thin tonight, but I'm going to give it a whirl while I'm mobile. But next week, guys, remember that Christmas, no, I will not. No, we're not going to be live on Christmas. I will try to choose you a good archive for those who want to tap in. But we are back on Boxing Day with Fritz Zimmerman, who's back with a new book called Ancient America, The Dark Side. And he dives deep into the realm of the supernatural associated with ancient burial mounds in earthworks in the Ohio Valley. He's got firsthand accounts of people who are witnessing things like shadow people, cryptids, even UFOs at these ancient sites. And he's been researching the Ohio mounds for probably 3 decades. So that's his thing. And Fritz Zimmerman has been on before. And this one's going to be pretty exciting. That is actually, he's on January 1st. Oh, God, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Hold on. Let me just see. I think I even got into this last week. Oh, okay. Michael Carter. So Fritz Zimmerman is going to be the first show of the year. And that's going to be January 1st. We're actually going to be here January 1st. By the 26th, Michael Carter returns, keeping everything light for December. He's going to be talking spirituality. He was supposed to be on the show last night, ended up featuring, he had to film another segment of Ancient Aliens. Well, another fellow Ancient Aliens colleague, Mark, who's also
I've done that. It's about the most fun you can have with your clothes on.
Exactly. Exactly. There we go. So, I'm sure he'll fill us in on some of that as well. So, guys, have yourself a terrific, terrific weekend. Please get in there tonight to anyone listening. We will be on Rumble. We will be on X. We will be on Roku TV. All of the standard platforms. Watch for the archive as well. And have a good holiday. We're going to see you guys next Thursday. I know. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
So thank you, guys. And good night.
Thank you.